Hello everyone, in this particular video we are going to talk about how to install the Ansible on your host machine. Okay, so from where you are going to operate all the setup. Okay, now the first thing we need to do is we need to install Ansible and we need to have a proper configuration. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so if you see what all the things we need to do to install Ansible is we need to clone the repository for Ansible. Okay, then we need to modify some configuration out of it. Okay, and with the help of that configuration we can set up the cluster. Okay, so if you closely look what I'm doing, I'm just cloning the code from this git, right? Then going inside it. Before that what I'm doing is I'm updating means I'm installing this on my local machine. Okay, after that if you want to validate the installation, just see the version. Okay, once that is done, you want to just check whether the setup of the Ansible is happened properly or not. Okay, now let's do it. Okay, so let me go to the system, let me copy this command. So these are the commands that we are going to use it. Okay, so I have this machine. Okay, I'm just cloning it, so it is saying git not found. So what I'll do, apt install git. So what it is saying, okay, let me just first update it, apt update. Okay, just to give me 1 minute. Looks like it is not working. Result.conf, we don't have any entry here. Okay, so let me do this first. Let me give 8.8.8.8. so now it should be reachable. First let me check ping google.com. okay, so now it's doing it. So now if I do update, it should work fine. Okay, so now it will not create any problem while setting up the Ansible. Okay, so the first command that we need to run is we need to close that clone that repository. That is what I'm going to do now. Now update is almost done. Yeah, so update is done. Let me go back and run this clone command. Okay, so the clone is not working because the git is not there. So first let me install the git. Okay, so git is ready. Now once git is ready, I can go and clone this repository now, which is happening. Once that is done, we need to go inside this repo. So let me go inside it. Let me check what is there in this repo. So we have a vagrant file. Let's first check what is this, what is there in this vagrant file. The vagrant configuration file, I don't see anything different. It is just have VM box information, network, giving private network. Okay, that's fine. We don't need to know all this. Okay, then let me just go to the lab 1. Okay, so that's it. Now next we need to do vagrant up. So the vagrant needs to be installed first. That is what I need to do first. Okay, so now it's almost doing it. What are the requirement we need to have to set up the Vagrant? Okay, Vagrant is again your cluster manager. You can set up a cluster using Vagrant as well. That is also very much can be doable. But how this Vagrant and Ansible can be used together, so that we are going to see here. So it's almost 60% done now. So let's wait for one more minute to finish it. So it's almost finishing fast now. It's around 75%. Last 20% is remaining. Looks like it got stuck at 75, but now it's moving 80, 85. It's now directly it will reach to the 90. Okay, so looks like it's done now. Okay, so once that is done, we can now do Vagrant up. Okay, so looks like it will finish now. It will finish now. Okay, it's done. Great. So now do Vagrant up. Let's see what it is saying. Control app, web 1, web 2. Bringing machine control up with libword. Bringing machine web 2 with this one. What it is saying? Control an error code. The error will be shown after all the tasks complete. What is the error? Please handle this error, then try again. Call to virtual connect open failed to connect socket. Okay, so it's saying like we don't have a Vagrant. Okay, so that's fine. If you don't have the Vagrant, that's fine. We can go ahead with the other commands because right now we don't require the Vagrant. Okay, so required the package, we are adding it. Add Ansible into the repository first. So now it's added. Now we can just simply update it and install the Ansible. Okay, so let's update it and finally we can install it. Okay, so now once installation is done, okay, we can verify whether the installation happened properly or not. Okay, so let's wait for the installation and then we'll see this ---- version command, through which we'll get to know what is the current version of Ansible. So still setting up the environment for us. Okay, so that's it. Now let's see whether it's got installed or not. Ansible ---- version. Here you can see that the current Ansible version is 2.9.11. config file is this one. Module search path is this. Okay, so that means now everything is working fine. Now the next thing what we can do is we can see the simple, okay, we can run some simple commands on your host machine. So what is the command to do this? Ansible -m ping localhost. Okay, so now instead of pinging directly, I'm trying to ping it via Ansible. So here if you see, the localhost success change false ping pong. Okay, so that means this ping is successfully happening. Okay, so that's why we got this type of option. Okay, now let's talk about the key component, that is inventory. Okay, so in inventory concept contains host, group, host and group variable, groups of groups, inventory parameters, dynamic inventory. Okay, so that let's see how we can create. So we have one location called etc ansible host, is a something like a ini file. Okay, and inside that you can give the all the inventory. Okay, so this inventory contains group. Okay, all the hosts are there. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll open this file and let's add some inventory there. So what is the location? Vi etc /etc ansible host. Okay, host. So now if I go inside it, you can see that right now everything is okay, empty. But if you see, there are some commented part is there. So what I'll do, just to understand, I'll uncomment one of the part. Okay, so now you can see that this web servers, I'm just uncommenting. I have 4 web servers. So now if I stop, save it. Okay, so now we have added this etc ansible host contains this web server information. Okay, so now what I'll do, okay, if you want to SSH into any machine, what I can do is simply I can write this information there on that file itself. Okay, so if you see closely, if I want to SSH or if I want to do anything else, that information you can add here. Okay, now let me just go back inside Ansible. What all the directories that we have is, we have host. Okay, so now this was the host. Let's go to the roles. So right now there is nothing. Let me show you the ansible.cfg. So now here are some basic default values, like what is the current location of inventory, what is the current location of library, modules, then plugin filters. Okay, then poll interval, sudo user. Okay, by default sudo user is a root, right? So that means how you want to do the SSH to the remote system, that we need a remote user for that. So that user is nothing but a root, right? So what all else information you see here is timeout chain, callback interval this much, module name, bin sh. Okay, so there are a lot of information is there. I don't think anything that we can see here for now, but yeah, we can definitely use all this configuration as and when required, but right now there is no need. So let's do one thing. Inside Ansible there is nothing of our interest. Okay, so what we can do is, if you want to define host and groups, in that case, if you, let's say by default this SSH happens on port 22, right? So if you want to change this port, so in that case, first you need to modify that SSH port on your host machine. Okay, and now to do that, we can use Ansible to do that. Okay, so what we can do is, I can assign web1 is equal to 222. So this Ansible will go to the, first it will go through the 22 port only, but it will go and modify this to some other port. Okay, or you can give the aliases this as well, web2 Ansible port 22, Ansible host this much. And if you want to give some ranges as well inside this inventory, or we call it as a configuration file, that is also perfectly feasible. Okay, now again, if you want to assign a variable to host, that will be used later in a playbooks. So that is also perfectly fine. So what I am doing here is I'm assigning variable name web1 and web2. Okay, so this web1 variable contains HTTP port 80 and HTTPS port 443, and then same is for web2 as well. So variable can also be applied to an entire group at once. Okay, so how we can do this for entire group is, we inside this grouping name itself you can do colon variable. It will apply to the entire group. Now we can have a group inside group. So that how we can do is, here if you see, we have created first two groups. Okay, then in the first group I have host 1, in the second group I have a host 2. Okay, now in the third group I'm including the first two groups which were there. Okay, now there are some inventory parameters that we required. The first inventory parameter that we required is the Ansible user. Okay, so we need to know the user through which we need to SSH into the remote machine. Okay, the next thing we need required is the private key file, because if you see this Ansible uses a SSH. Okay, so now if we know the username but still to do the SSH we need a password. So to avoid this password, what we can do is we can set up a key value pair. Okay, that is a private public key. So again we need a private key through which we can do log in into the SSH. Okay, now equivalent to Ansible sudo or Ansible su allows to force privilege escalation. Okay, so if you want to have a privilege escalation, privilege access, okay, in that case you can use this parameter. Now inventory can be gathered on demand from other sources dynamically. Those sources include Cobbler, Cloud APIs. Okay, so this is mostly talking about the, if you are using any third-party clusters. Okay, so in that case we runtime we can just ask this. Okay, so let's quickly talk about how to create the inventory. Okay, now how we can create the inventories. First thing is the location where we can create the inventories. We have already just seen this Ansible host. Okay, so this is the inventory location. Now we can, inside that we can have a multiple server that we are using in our cluster. So all the server details and their variable names can be put inside the inventory. Okay, now we just talked about creating an individual host. Okay, but what if you want to create a group of hosts? Okay, so that is also perfectly fine. So in that case what we need to do is we need to create a sections, and inside that section you can write all the related host. We call it as a group in that inventory file. Okay, now if you see closely here you can see that we have a groups. Web server is one group which contains two web servers. App server is again one more group which contain app, and then DB server is another group which contain a DB, and then there is one more group called DC, data center children's. What are the children's of that data center is web servers, app servers and DB servers. Okay, so this way you can create an inventory, and then this inventory we can use while configuring the cluster. Okay, now in previous example we just try to set up all the grouping and inventory. Okay, so now if you just want to verify whether that grouping or the host mapping and everything happened properly, you just simply with the ping command, the Ansible ping command, you can check if those all the machines are really reachable from your Ansible client. Okay, Ansible agent we call it as. So once these commands are fine, in that case your setup will work properly. Okay, so now if you see I'm adding this 4 different web servers. Okay, so let me do one thing. What I'll do, I'll add some alias, or we can call it as a variable name. So let me add the next one. web 3 and web 4. Okay, so now I just added 4 different variables inside web servers. So what I'll do, I'll try to access it. How I can access? Ansible -m ping. I'll try to ping to the web 1. Okay, so here you can see that failed to parse host with the YAML plugin. We are able to read either as JSON or not YAML. These are the errors we get from each JSON. No JSON object could be recorded while loading YAML. Did not find expected doc start. Okay, unable to pass as an inventory. No inventory was passed. Only implicit cost is available. So just a minute. Okay, so let me do one thing. Go here. I'll come here, paste a group, and inside this group now, inside this group I'll do web 1, web 2. Okay, so for now this 2 is fine. And now if I try to do this, now it should be able to fail to pass. Okay, still it is showing fail to pass, but that's fine. That's just a warning. Okay, but the main problem here is we don't have access to this web 1. Okay, we just given this random IP, so that is the reason it is giving error. Okay, so now let's see the next SSH key. Okay, so how we can set up the SSH key? Using OpenSSL command we can set up the key, and then that key we can use to log in to the remote server. Okay, so all this command we are going to see in the next video. Okay, so I think till then we can stop in this video. Okay.